This is God in the Grind.
God in the Grind podcast is in partnership with the Virginia Christian Chamber of Commerce and powered by Selah Productions. Visit us at covidchristianchamber.com or find us on social media at COVID Christian Chamber or Coastal Virginia Christian Chamber of Commerce. Hey, this is Roberta.
And Joseph.
And we are God in the Grind podcast. We are the Virginia Christian Chamber in coalition with the U.S. Christian Chamber. And we are excited today that we have a special guest that came to the podcast desk. And when we first arrived here yesterday morning, we were in his first session where he was a panelist. So tell us a little bit about yourself, your name, and the name of your company and what you do.
Sure. Yeah. So my name is Sebastian Harris. I'm the managing partner of two asset management firms. One's called Aranova Capital, which is private credit real estate fund. And then the second one is called Sandbox, which is a venture capital fund where we focused on investing in faith-based founders, specifically in order to see if we can shape culture as much as we possibly can through the tech space and see Christian founders actually get to scale so that we can shape culture more effectively. A little bit about me. Born in Australia, grew up in New Zealand, moved to the U.S. about 10 years ago, followed an American girl over to the U.S., saw a green card and blonde American girl from California in my eyesight. And
it's always about a girl. We've heard that story a couple times today.
Yeah.
The Lord will use a lot of things, right?
Absolutely, yeah. And so it's been great. We've been kind of around the country doing a lot of different things. We did a lot of work in the U.S.-Israel relationship with an organization called U.S. Israel Education Association down in Alabama. So we were there for a couple of years and then ended up in Southern California where we did a number of different startups and had some success. One of them was called Public Square, which is a values-based e-commerce platform to fintech marketplace.
Okay.
So I was the co-founder, chief operating officer from inception through IPO. And then shortly after took an exit and then have been dabbling in other projects, mergers and acquisitions, funds, and now eventually asset management. So
wow,
it's a little bit about my few short years on planet.
And I heard you say yesterday that you were the youngest up there at what was that like yesterday being is this your first time here at the CEO Summit?
First time, yes, at the CEO Summit. It's an amazing privilege, honestly, to be here. I was chatting with my wife the other day, and the reality is, what I've done sounds impressive. It's impressive to do that at 33 years old.
Wow.
But at its core, I honestly feel like I've just been following God into the next thing. Like it's not actually, it doesn't feel like, I've intentionally tried to take a company public or intentionally tried to build asset management firms. It's not being the conversation. The conversation is, what is God doing and how can I participate in what he's doing in order to shape culture as much as humanly possible? And so
what stuck out to me yesterday was you talked about the Moravians. Yeah. Right? Yeah. And I was like, finally, there's someone speaking our language.
I was just telling her about Count Zinzendorf the other day. She didn't know the story, so
okay.
It's filling her in, but I known about it for 20 years, 25 years.
It's an amazing story.
Yeah. So some of our listeners, why don't you say what you were saying yesterday?
Certainly. Yeah. So Count Zinzendorf was a count, significant leader inside Germany back in the 1800s. And what he did was he gave a lot of land and resources to a group that are now known as the Moravians. And the Moravians were a group of people who are committed to 24/7 prayer and worship. And as a part of what they were doing trades and being sent out as missionaries in the context of the marketplace at that time. So they're being sent out as blacksmiths and woodworkers and carpenters and stonemasons and things like that. But from this posture of if we're going to go and disciple culture, then let's go and do it through business. Let's set ourselves up in villages and towns where, we can share the gospel and do that, but actually have a meaningful trade to grow and build cities and eventually nations. And that's what birthed out of that. And so Count Zinzendorf was the financier. He gave the land, he produced and supported these guys. And he had an interesting story of ups and downs, where, he had to go and find other financiers to help continue the mission and along his journey. And I think there's some funny stories about how, he would go and invest in all these things and then have funny conversations with his wife later about, where all the money was going, but he
like
was,
they went, what happened? I mean, we all had that conversation, right?
exactly. Yeah.
So you are the Count Zinfendorf? Zinzendorf.
Well,
Is that what you strive to be?
that's one of my main goals is like I want to be able to fund and finance what God is doing on the planet, whether it's revival, reformation, see what God's doing. And so the motivation for wealth creation to me is how do we facilitate what God is doing? How do we participate in a conversation that heaven's already having on the earth right now and use resources as a tool to do it?
Wow. Didn't Zinzendorf, isn't there a story tied to that Moravian community of, I think it was two missionaries sold themselves into slavery to be missionaries? Have you heard about that?
That sounds familiar to me.
I feel like it was Moravians, and they sold themselves into slavery to reach the slaves. And they were married. And the wives are like crying out to them as they're like boarding the boat. They're like, why are you doing this? And they said, so that Christ can receive the reward for his suffering. Now, I don't know if they should have left their wives. Right? I don't know the backstory on that. But, I mean, they were clearly fueled by love for Christ and the gospel to be able to go into slavery to reach slaves. I mean, that just shows you the gospel is the great equalizer, that they value even the slaves so much to go into that. So I think it was the Moravian community. Now, I remember Calvin, at the time when, Martin Luther is, and we think of the time of the Reformation when Luther's translating the Bible into the common German language for the people so that they can have access to it, which just turned everything hopefully right side up, I'd say. Calvin, on the other hand, I understood was training people and sending them back out into culture, just like Zinzendorf later did. And, that's why we're doing what we're doing with the Christian Chamber of Commerce, because, we feel like we're called to equip the saints to do the work of the ministry. But we believe the work of the ministry is not being a greeter. I mean, sometimes it is, but at a much lower level. But when it comes to transforming culture and carrying the gospel outside of the church, if we're going to transform culture, we just did an episode with 3 or 4 of our members just a few minutes ago. And I told them, I said, you guys are the heroes of the story. It's not the pastors. It's not us. We're here to help you build relationships, which everyone calls networking, and amplify what you're doing, and give you any tools, training, resources we need. We want to bring those together. So, I mean, it's so exciting to hear that you're out in that space and you're doing it. What does city transformation, cultural transformation look like for you in your companies?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it's one of the conversations I've been having around recently is, the world of nonprofit and ministry is fantastic. A lot of great things happen. Lives get transformed. There's a lot of beauty in that space. But what is a big problem, and we're starting to see this across the church in general at the moment, a little bit more perhaps than in the last 10 years, where there are ministry leaders who they're aging out. They're either passing on or things are changing. And so what's interesting is that the capital that's actually sustained those organizations has actually been more tied to the leader or the person that's been having that conversation. And so the question becomes, well, how do we sustainably finance and resource what God's doing on the planet and disassociate the capital requirements potentially from the man of peace or the pastor or the leader, whatever that situation is, and actually bring it into contexts that actually make more sense. And then the other side of that coin is the nonprofit world traditionally, unless there's large endowments, the nonprofit world has to continually and perpetually raise money over and over again. And so part of the question for us is, how does capital become sustainable, number one, but also how does it get put in places where, it's high growth, high management, actually being used in the right places to be able to do that. And that can happen a lot easier in a for-profit conversation and an investment-based conversation as opposed to a donor-based conversation.
Right.
And so, the question then becomes, well, how do we create and sustain significant wealth and capital for the kingdom to be advanced at that conversation. And so for us, that looks like asset management of high net worth individuals, but then redeploying the capital into places where it needs to go, whether that's a for-profit company or a nonprofit. Either works. But what that ends up doing is creating a situation where capital is working on behalf of the king at the end of the day. It's like in the Bible, the parable of the talents. What's significant about that story is that it was multiplication that led to authority. And so if God has given us, 5 talents and then we multiply them to 10 talents, or if 2 and gets transformed into 4, that's what Jesus is saying is actually success. And it's multiplication that God is interested in that therefore leads to authority. And so we see this in culture where, people like Elon Musk, just as an example, worked and stewarded capital, built a bunch of businesses, made a ton of money, and then was given authority in the Doge conversation to be able to have leadership and authority to cut federal spending. And so, which is amazing. But that's the parable of the talents at work in culture that has demonstrated from multiplication into authority. And so,
Sebastian, you're such a breath of fresh air.
Well, thank you.
To hear. It's just, it's unbelievable what he's doing. Yeah.
Well, I think it's amazing, but I also think it's a call for us as believers to step in and say, well, then we have to figure out how to multiply capital.
Right.
We have to figure that out, because if we're going to have authority beyond, we've got a grace covering at the moment, it feels like, with the Trump administration to build infrastructure in order that in a new environment that will come, that we have the infrastructure to sustain what God is doing right now. And so that's the motivation.
I remember I was in a conference, and the pastor on the stage, this is more of an apostolic leader, but he said, the people that did not steward and multiply what God had given them Jesus called them wicked and lazy. And I'm just like,
I don't want to be that. Yeah.
I was like, oh my gosh, it's like you don't see it. You just don't think about it.
Right.
Yeah, if we're not building for the kingdom, then what are we doing?
Exactly. I mean, Jesus also said, it would be better for your capital be sitting in a high interest savings account than for you to do nothing with it. But the church is sitting on significant capital resources, but it sits in accounts, and what are we doing? What are we doing here? And Jesus talked about money almost more than anything else.
Right.
Right. And so because the answer is not create wealth in order to store it for yourself. That's actually the wickedness, right? It's like when you look at the scripture that says the love of money is the root of all evil, that love of money is probably better translated as avarice, which is, an old term concept of greed, specifically meaning to create wealth in order to store it for yourself and not keep it going. And so God therefore blesses money that keeps moving. And so if money keeps moving into other things, that's, I think, how God thinks about capital. So it's less about us holding and storing and much more about us becoming pipelines for where God wants to put it.
Yeah, I think you really like fear leads to hoarding.
Certainly.
Faith leads to utilization.
Certainly.
Investing and implementation. Tell
us about Public Square, and who was this an instance in your life? Was there a mentor? Was there someone who showed you, who opened your eyes to this is the way?
To building businesses.
Yeah.
What's a little bit of a backstory. And so we were a part of an organization called U.S. Israel Education Association, which is run by a friend, Heather Johnston, who's from Birmingham, Alabama. And she is helping to facilitate bringing U.S. congressmen and senators from the U.S. over into Israel, to Judea and Samaria, and to educate these leaders on what's actually going on the ground. And part of I think this was 2019, we were a part of putting on the first ever Israeli-Palestinian Economic Forum in Jerusalem. So very significant event where significant groups across Israel and the U.S. were looking to have this conversation around prosperity towards peace. And, this is 6 years ago now. So, before what's happened recently. but in that conversation, we had a pitch event just like we had yesterday at the Liberty Accelerator, and these guys got up, Jews got up, Palestinians got up, and started pitching these companies that would be transformational in a geopolitical sense, but using business to be able to do it. So coming together as co-founders, as equals inside business to really seek prosperous change to culture. And a dynamic like the Middle East, specifically in Israel, and the whole situation that's been going on there, working together with those people to try to foster breakthrough and cultural shift. And so for me, I remember sitting in the back of the room at the event and just watching it all unfold. And for me, I felt like God dropped in my spirit that a business is the vehicle for transformation, because it gives so much credibility to the individuals involved. Capitalist systems actually work and have set more people free than any other kind of economic system that we've ever seen. And so in that conversation, what if we could use business to shift geopolitical situations or culture in general? And so the Public Square was really birthed out of that. For me, it was, at least, in terms of how do we use business as a vehicle to empower entrepreneurs, empower people in the marketplace. During the COVID lockdowns in California, which is where we started, there was a number of people who were mandating the vax mandates and also the mask wearing and different things like that. But there are also significant numbers of small to medium-sized businesses that were saying, this is ridiculous. And so all we did in reality was aggregate those lists in an app and then funneled them towards e-commerce. And we did a bunch of other things, which were really exciting. But, at its core, we were trying to facilitate, let's help the small, medium-sized businesses actually get what they need.
That's always what it's about.
Yeah,
right.
Where it started.
Finding the need and giving them the platform or the vehicle. Yeah, and the resources.
Yeah, give them permission to live a life on the platform of their values, build their business on the platform of their values. At its core, we all live on the platform of our values, but why do we not bring that into?
Why do we separate it?
Exactly.
When Joseph and I have only been married for 2.5 years. I was in secular.
A blonde.
No.
I run a chamber.
No. Well, there's some truth to that. But I was in secular rock radio in the shadow of New York City. I was at the Howard Stern station, WCCC, and Dee Snider was my morning show. I was so far away from the Lord. I was raised Catholic. My brother prayed for me. We thought, something was wrong with Chris in Connecticut. It just didn't happen that people went and got saved. And he prayed for me and for years fasted, prayed. And one day, 10 years ago, I gave my life to the Lord, and he just radically transformed everything, all my thoughts, everything that I've done. But he takes all things, right? So he moved me down to Virginia Beach. I was in management in a group of radio stations, and I meet my husband, and he was a pastor and in Reformation, and I heard him speak on marketplace ministry, and he spoke to me right where I was. So I didn't have to be in a church because I just wanted to please the Lord at that point, right? So I helped ministries do podcasts and however I could serve, right? But he showed me I was exactly where I was supposed to be, right? And that I was going to do amazing work there. So it started changing the culture. So I believe that all of our businesses, that we have these, sleeper cells that have to be awoken, right? With the right leadership, with the right people and a community around them to be able to bring to life that organization, to take back what the enemy stole in all the mountains. And super excited.
That's amazing.
What you're doing.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
So what's kind of your biggest challenge or need right now with everything you're working on? I mean, what's your core challenge?
It's a good question.
Because I know you're involved in a lot.
Yeah.
We're doing a few things. Yeah. Yeah. Let's see. So, we're currently raising further capital for the funds to be able to increase and scale what we're doing. So that's a big part of what we're focused on at the moment. It's interesting. Part of our structure with how we've decided to do this specifically on the venture side, is that we wanted to be able to create some solutions for liquidity for investors, even inside a venture capital environment, which, in traditional venture capital, of course, you deploy capital and it could be 8, 9, 10 years before there's any kind of return or exit. So for investors, we wanted to be able to try to solve some of that liquidity problem. The other side of the problem in venture capital is that the world is so focused on a different set of values than we're talking about here. And so it's very extractive traditionally in terms of how the terms that get thrown around to founders from venture capital firms. And so we really wanted to step into a place where we could bring returns to investors and kind of solve that problem, but also take pressure off of founders to just perform financially. And so if we could get the founders in a place where we can still write them a check, still help them grow, facilitate their conversation, but not add negative pressure, still normal pressure to grow and build your company,
right,
and be successful and be excellent in everything that you do, which results in growth and money on the table and things like that. But what would be different, instead of being pushed by fear of a financial firm and because of their investors trying to get returns for them, why don't we diversify a little bit and put founders more in a position to be able to be motivated by mission, vision, values, and actually serve them to be able to do that. And so structure's hybrid in that dynamic, and so as a result, nobody's heard of it before.
No, right.
So, you talk to lawyers in New York, and they're amazing. We got a great team, but it's just when you innovate with a God idea, sometimes you have to educate people on how this all works and how to navigate it, and so it's fun, in some senses.
Good, Mark.
Yeah, it's been fun.
And they go, wait, and where is the money going? And when are we going to get it back? And how much is it going to be? And so you're really around the right people, and God is leading you to do the thing. So how will people find out about you, or is there anything that we can follow to be able to?
Yeah, sure. I have a Substack, which I post on as regularly as I can. I think it's Empowering Principle to Innovation is what it's called. And that's been great. It's a great place to connect with me there. I'm on LinkedIn fairly regularly.
What is a Substack?
Substack's like a modern blog.
Okay. I didn't know the word. I was afraid to even say that. I didn't know the word.
Yeah,
Substack.
Substack's actually great. There's some fantastic people on there doing some great.
Oh, okay. So it's a community, and you have to buy into this community?
You can follow certain people, and you can pay to follow further in those kind of dynamics. Mine is not paid, so just free content out there, which is awesome. And
that's wonderful.
We're having some fun, and so that, and LinkedIn, our fund website is sandbox.fund.
Okay.
And we're having a bunch of fun.
Yeah, cool. I want to play in the sandbox. I don't know about you, but it sounds like some really good sand is in there. But thank you for blessing us today. You're coming by our podcast.
To meet you both.
Yes, thank you, Sebastian.
Yeah.
Well, this was God in the Grind podcast, and Joseph and Roberta signing out. God in the Grind podcast is in partnership with the Virginia Christian Chamber of Commerce and powered by Selah Productions. Visit us at covachristianchamber.com or find us on social media at Cova Christian Chamber or Coastal Virginia Christian Chamber of Commerce.